What's going on, guys? It's Infinity Blerd, your friendly neighborhood nerd and movie buff, currently available on all podcast platforms and YouTube. Here to talk about another classic superhero movie, Spider-Man 2, directed by Sam Raimi. Once again, the last good movie in the franchise before we got the crap that is Spider-Man 3. Shaking my head. I already reviewed the first Spider-Man, so if you haven't watched it yet, please do so. Like, subscribe, and comment. A lot of people still consider Spider-Man 2 the best out of the 7 movies in the franchise so far, over, 3 different universes. I would argue that it probably is the best Peter Parker movie, but just a solid Spider-Man movie, and it has quite a few flaws, which I will get into. Now, I was debating whether or not I should review Spider-Man 2.1, which was later changed to Spider-Man the Extended Edition, probably to sound less gimmicky. But when it came down to it, I decided to go with the theatrical version. Director's cuts occasionally can be quite good, but majority of the time, what a director's cut is, as I said, just a way to capitalize on the movie, and they just add scenes that should have been removed in the first place and don't really add to anything, don't really add any character development. So Spider-Man 2.1 was essentially a gimmick. I think I read somewhere that Sam Raimi was even like, I made Spider-Man 2, there was no reason for there to be a 2.1, so that pretty much solidified in my mind that, okay, it's just like the additional stuff is trash. Nobody is trying to see J. Jonah Jameson in a Spidey suit trying to act like he's Spider-Man. Oh, hell no. Under no circumstance would that make sense. Dude clearly hates the dude, and it's not that hate that's like secretly I admire him and I love him. No. He really doesn't like Spider-Man. So it's things like that. Yeah, there's an extended scene where Peter Parker's in the elevator because his web stopped working, and there's a publicist who's trying to sell him on improving his brand, creating colognes called Thwip, and all sorts of foolishness, man. And there's also an additional scene with Mary Jane is talking to her friend about how she's not really in love with her fiance, as if we don't know, because you look at Mary Jane the whole movie and she looks miserable the whole time unless she's with Peter. It's like, man, all fluff and all foolishness that detracts from the actual story. So now let's get into the actual movie. So if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe and like at any point. Let's go. Opening scenes are probably my favorite opening scenes from any superhero movie because it's done by legendary artist Alex Ross, responsible for some of the best comic books out there from Marvel and DC. Definitely have a chance to look at his stuff if you haven't already. And I just love this over the opening titles in the first one, which was just like a hodgepodge of just CG that didn't really add anything. And here you have like this like beautiful art recreating the events of the first story. So that was well done on everyone's part. First act is classic Peter Parker stuff, him trying to balance his social life, even though he has like 2 friends and one secretly hates him and one is a girl that he can't be with. But yeah, so him balancing that out, him trying to, pay his rent, which he can barely do so in a horrible apartment, him trying to help Aunt May out because she's about to be evicted, but he still has to balance out trying to be Spider-Man. Oh man. When we encounter Peter Parker, he is about to lose his job if he doesn't deliver these pizzas on time in 30 minutes. So he currently has a scooter, so then he decides to take a faster route by web slinging. So I thought it was a cool scene because it shows his real life applications to his powers and stuff. Speaking of Manhattan, they had Peter Parker living in, it looked like a tenement building in the Lower East Side with a community bathroom and stuff. I'm not judging on anybody's life situation, but I didn't know those things still exist. Do they still exist? Yo, the landlord was crazy. Buck Wild dude was like,
I have ears like a cat and eyes like a rodent.
And yo, he really tried to hunt Peter down for his rent. Pants down, didn't even wipe and everything. Yo, that had me rolling. Peter Parker's life is so hectic that he forgets that it's his birthday. That is
Say
sad.
something.
And the only people who show up to his birthday is his aunt,
Peter.
his emotionally unstable friend who low-key hates him because he thinks he's defending the guy who killed his father. What? And the other person is his girl who's not really his girl, who dated his best friend and now is seeing somebody else. Man, yeah. And the whole time at the party, she's flirting with Peter. And then after that, she's like, oh, by the way, I'm seeing somebody. Man, you just forgot to mention that. Man, soap operas have nothing on this drama. Crazy. During the party, Harry mentions that he's funding Doc Ock's research, and it just happens that Peter is writing a paper on Doc. That seemed a little too convenient, but I mean, that's just how some movies go, especially superhero movies, so I won't trip too much on that. Aunt May, to this day, is still one of the best parts of this movie. They always give her the gut-punching, gut-wrenching scenes. Peter eventually confesses, vaguely but still, that he somehow was responsible for Uncle Ben's death. Like, he could have done something to prevent the guy who did something, and he chose not to do anything. And man, she just recoiled when he tries to touch her and just walked away. That's that next level disappointment. You know, it's way worse when your parent doesn't scream at you, they just walk away. Peter comes back to check on Aunt May, and she's already moving because they foreclosed on the house and stuff, and all is forgiven. She doesn't hold any grudges against Peter, and it's like a real family. Like, they argue, they fight, but at the end of the day, they love each other. Even though Aunt May is tripping out for selling all of Peter's old comics. No, I think she just gave them away. Damn. Shaking my head. In that same scene, she asked Peter if Spider-Man's coming back. I mean, the whole thing is that Peter's like, oh yeah, me and Spider-Man are friends, but she's not an idiot. I think she knows who Spider-Man is. I always hated that trope of freaking loved ones who spend all sorts of time with these heroes. Detectives and reporters can't figure out who these heroes are. So I enjoyed that. Also, Robbie kind of mean mugs Peter Parker, like,
I heard Spider-Man was there.
Where were you? Photograph?
like, oh man, it's like, so he definitely knows who Spider-Man is too. I really like Robbie in the comics and in the show, and they kind of, yeah, they didn't give him any kind of screen time. Doc Ock was played by Alfred Molina, wonderful actor. He did a great job with what he was given. But yeah, we're going to get into the whole character of Doc Ock, and this is where the film kind of goes downhill for me. So we finally get introduced to Doc Ock at the end of the first act, or maybe the beginning of the second act, which I like, because a lot of the times we're bombarded with information in superhero movies, or you have the bad guys doing something crazy from jump, and I liked how they introduced Doc Ock in this one, because it's like we get to spend time with Peter Parker first, reestablish him, see what's going on with him, and then we can move on to the villain of the stories. The movie is a straight up tragedy, yo. They took Doc Ock, Otto Octavius, hopeful, brilliant, a romantic, and they fucked his whole shit up. At the beginning, dude is dropping all sorts of gems and all sorts of wonderful advice.
Intelligence is not a privilege, it's a gift. And you use it for the good of mankind.
And towards the end, dude doesn't follow any of it at all. Yo, so they really had Doc Ock testing out fusion. Like, I'm not sure if it was nuclear, but fusion in the middle of a studio apartment in the middle of New York City with spectators, man, shaking my head. And nobody had protective goggles except for him. What's with that, man? I learned in kindergarten, man. Protect your eyes, man. Damn, what? It's ridiculous. And knowing all the risks and the amount of things that could go wrong and blowing up the city, wouldn't you think maybe I should practice this before I do this in front of investors and stuff like that? I understand that the element that I think it was tritium or something like that is rare, but damn, we all know Harry had a whole bunch of it. You should give a little more to test that out. That is so outlandish and so ridiculous. I will never understand what the logic was behind that. And the arms were mad problematic for me since day one. Why would you even, like, I just don't understand the science or the logic behind the arms. I'm not sure if Doc Ock coded the ability for the arms to take over and have all this additional thought. Like, wouldn't you just code simple functions for them and not even give the option for them to come back and take over your mind? Yeah, how did they become autonomous? Did they hook up with Skynet? I don't think Wi-Fi was big back then. Like, what's going on? It just felt like a convenient plot device to kind of make him go evil, since he was such an amazing guy right before that. And I guess they wanted the progression from like amazing guy to crazy guy fast. So he did know that, oh, the arms could take over my mind, so I'm gonna just make a chip. Just one chip. Just one. I mean, wouldn't you have at least a backup chip? Am I missing something? At least a backup chip. Yo, I know like spaceships and stuff, they have hundreds of fail safes in case something goes wrong. You're doing nuclear fusion in the middle of the city, creating a sun, okay? You have arms that could go Skynet, destroy everybody, and you just have one fail safe. And you decided to put the chip in the most exposed area that you could possibly think of, just in case. Man, I have a migraine. On top of that, just to make sure dude stays nuts and stays a villain, you decide to have his wife get impaled by glass. Wow. Savage. These writers are savage mofos. Yeah, all of this was a product of lazy writing, and I think the issue with some of these superhero movies before the Nolan era is that Nolan set such a standard for superhero movies that, looking back in retrospect, they come off as like not as good, since the standard was set so high. Doesn't take away from the movies, but it's just like I have to, acknowledge some of the flaws when it comes to these scripts. And also, I mean, I used to watch these films when I was younger, so I didn't really question any of this stuff. It would just be like, Spiderman, woo, let's go. Man, that scene was crazy. Afterwards, in the operating table, when they were trying to remove Doc Ock's arms, and the arms started murdering all the doctors. It's crazy. And it was cool because it was like Sam Raimi was going back to his classic, horror roots, where he came from. So I thought that was well done. Even though I was like, damn, in a kid's movie, that's kind of messed up. Oh, you saw when the girl, she was grabbing on the floor and the nails were going through the... Then Doc Ock goes to his new lair, just some warehouse, just chilling by the river. Expensive, how expensive real estate is in Manhattan, and you're just like, let's just leave it dilapidated and stuff. We don't have to fix it. Whatever. And then he was like, okay, well, I don't know if it's him or the arms. It's not really clear what the motivations are or who's really in control. I guess the arms are in control, and they're like, let's build an experiment. And it didn't work the first time, but let's build it bigger. What? Like, yeah, that always bothered me. What are the motivations for Doc Ock's arms? Is it just to see carnage? Is it so they can blow themselves up and blow Doc Ock up too? Like, what? Man, shaking my head. Also, we can't forget the arms all up in the air, all dramatic and whatnot. Anytime I see it in a movie, I love it. And where did Doc Ock get those parts again? Doesn't seem like something you could really get in the black market. I mean, I guess you could pretty much find anything in the black market, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe he got them from his old place. Oh wait, it all imploded during the first experiment, so he would have had to have gotten new equipment. Yeah, that's something like we should see. Like, who would sell those parts to him again, knowing that full well that he'd probably blow up New York City again? So Aunt May is trying to refinance her house or try to do something with the loans and stuff like that, and conveniently Doc Ock just happens to be at that branch to get the money for his new equipment. Like, the city is a big place, and they just happen to be at the same place On a side note, Aunt May mentions to the loan officer that she's been giving piano lessons to kids. So you might wonder, who cares? Why are you saying this? This is very important when we talk about Spider-Man 3, because in Spider-Man 3, Peter Parker is playing the piano like he's Billy Joel or some foolishness, you know? And I was always going around saying, yo, this is BS. How would he know how to play the piano? He never learned, and this and the third. And so they didn't show us, but if Aunt May was a piano teacher, I guess she would have taught Peter Parker at some point, even though we should have seen it. So back to the robbery. Out of all the people Doc Ock snatches Aunt May, a lot of convenient stuff in this movie. A lot of convenient stuff. You hear that scene where Peter Parker, when the danger comes, Peter Parker's like, gotta go, and just rolls up. It's funny. They think he's just running, but he's really changing into his Spider-Man outfit. So I thought that was a good scene, and I also think that probably solidified in Aunt May's mind that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, because she knows he wouldn't just be the type of guy to just run and like leave her to get hurt or something, and she never really confronts him about it, so she must know. Just doesn't want to embarrass Peter or make Peter tell her, so she indirectly says,
Spider-Man did that for Henry, and he wonders where he's gone. He needs him.
Stuff. And you gotta love Aunt May, man. The dude in the bank tries to put one of those coins in his shirt pocket, and she got the classic the same thing she did to Norman.
Norman?
And Doc tries to stab Peter, and she splits Doc's wig. This movie has a B story where his powers stop working. And it's kind of like they just stop working kind of like to progress the plot or for convenience to make things more dramatic. So let's say he needs to stick on the wall. Okay, the walls, he can't stick on walls. Let's say he needs to web sling. Oh, that goes. Let's say he needs super strength. That doesn't work. So, I mean, once again, the key word is convenience. Just a lot of convenient writing. Dude straight up fell a few stories and then healed real quick afterwards. I mean, he had back pain, and it was for comedic value. It was like, ooh, ah, oh. And then he was walking fine. Like, to fall like that many stories, but your powers are failing, but you can still heal after that. I didn't understand that. In the comics, there's quite a few iterations where, like, he loses his powers and things like that. I mean, I think he has a cold in one thing, and I mean, also villains have done other things to make him lose his powers. They don't really explain that here. I mean, we can only speculate. I mean, maybe the amount of stress he was under caused him to lose his powers, but this is something that I feel is very important and should have been made apparent in the movie. Maybe he was malnourished or iron deficient or something, and that's why he lost his powers. You saw when the landlord's daughter brought that cake and he inhaled it. Dang, you know that was his first meal of the day. Tragic. The Doctor clearly knows that Peter Parker's Spider-Man because he, Peter Parker's like, in this dream, my friend Spider-Man. It's not me. It's my friend, and I'm falling, and I don't know what to do, and this doctor, mind you, he's not a therapist, really decides to give Peter some advice. Why don't you suggest him to a therapist? He's like, oh, maybe you're not supposed to be Spider-Man. Maybe, yeah, man, because of the shit advice you gave, Doctor, hundreds, if not thousands of people will die. Man, shaking my head. Yo, I really need to know where these doctors got these degrees in this universe. Man, this doctor's whack. Doc Ock, clearly whack. In this dream sequence where he sees Uncle Ben, he kind of absolves himself of the responsibility of being Spider-Man. And then, yeah, he just goes about his day, man, like not being Spider-Man. So countless people could die. Little kids could get murdered. And dude is just walking about like everything's cool. You see sirens rolling up, and dude really is like deep throating a freaking hot dog as the sirens are going. Like, yeah, some guys in an alleyway getting curb stomped. Who knows if they're about to bust out a knife and shank the shit out of them. And Peter's like, damn, that sucks. I'm just acting like I don't see anything. This irked the daylights out of me. What? Yo. It's like, it's just not something Peter Parker would ever do. And I would understand if, like, afterwards he felt some sort of guilt and that was like a plot point in the movie, but they didn't do that. For all we know, the guy's probably dead now, and that's on your hands, Peter, because you just sat there and didn't do anything about it. Tragic. Yeah, it takes this scene where there's a burning building, and he has to go in and he saves this little girl, and I mean, but then he overhears that someone didn't make it, and like, yeah, Peter Parker, that's on you, dude, because you decided not to bring your suit and somebody died. So I guess after that he felt the responsibility to be Spider-Man, not the countless other people that he just left hanging, or that guy he left in the alleyway to bleed out and shit. Now we gotta talk about that scene where Peter Parker and Mary Jane meet up at the diner. Oh man, when I saw the trailers, it looked cool, but in retrospect, man, so Doc Ock goes to seek out Peter Parker because Harry asks for it and says, I'll give you all the tritium if you find me Spider-Man, and Peter Parker would know where he is. Do not hurt him. He says, do not hurt Peter. Okay, so Peter Parker and Mary Jane are talking in the diner, flirting some more, and yeah, Peter was like, I thought I could be with you because I'm not Spider-Man, but it turns out I can't be with you. Thanks. Sorry, Mary Jane. And all of a sudden, a car goes through the fucking diner, man. What is going on, yo? And yeah, he throws a whole car through the window, and he didn't know he was Spider-Man. If Spider-Man didn't have the Spidey sense, if Peter Parker didn't have the Spidey sense, it would have been a wrap for him. He would have died. You would have never got your tritium, and then what would you have done then? Like, that scene made no sense. I get Doc Ock is crazy, but, and I guess the arms are controlling him, but I would think the arms want the tritium, so that maybe they shouldn't try to throw a car at the one person they need. And then after that, he just slams Peter Parker into the wall with mad force, which would kill any regular person, and he fell under rubble and stuff, or it would have injured him like horribly. And then Doc Ock conveniently steals Mary Jane. Man, that's some crazy luck. Well, I guess Harry didn't say anything about not picking up Mary Jane, so whatever. And then we have the infamous train scene that still holds up to this day. Peter really did some crazy stuff to, prevent the train from falling off the tracks and stuff. That was really cool. His mask also got burned and fell off, and the New Yorkers gave him his mask and said they would defend him. They wouldn't say who he is, even though New York's a big place. How would they know who he is anyway? It's not like he's someone famous or anything like that. So that was cool. The New Yorkers tried to defend Peter against Doc Ock, even though Doc Ock fucked them up. Yeah, falling out the train windows and all sorts of crazy stuff. Like he probably murdered some of those guys. But yeah, that was still a iconic scene and will go down in history. Yo, Doc Ock / Mechanical Skynet arms have the worst idea. So you had to bring Spider-Man to Harry Osborn. So you decided, let me fuck up the train brakes and let the train run off the rails and kill everybody, including Spider-Man. But then you were like, oh, you know what? I forgot something. Let me go pick him up after he stopped the train. Like, what if Spider-Man didn't stop the train? That's what I'm saying, man. Like, yo, you need to think your plans out, Doc Ock. What are you doing? You're supposed to be a brilliant mind. So Doc Ock decides to turn on the machine again. Doesn't check his equations. Doesn't put the pen and paper and was like, let me figure this out. See, I make sure I don't blow up anything again. Does it the exact same way. I mean, I guess that's the definition of insanity. Repeating the same thing and expecting different results. So yeah, he must be insane. And him and Skynet arms. So Doc Ock gets some electroshock therapy and automatically he's better. And convenient. I mean, so I guess when it comes down to it, yeah, the arms were the problem. The arms were making him do crazy shit, and we'll never know what their motivations were. And Doc Ock was like, I will not die a monster. And yeah, just drowned the big old sun with him. And Mary Jane and Peter Parker whisked off. I don't know what he was web slinging on. The webs just grabbed onto absolutely nothing, and his web slinged on. But whatever. That was the end of Doc Ock. And then Mary Jane finally sees who Peter Parker is now that he was Spider-Man. Apparently, she had no idea. Even though at the end of the first one, it felt like she suspected it when they kissed, but she seemed just as shocked. Okay, sure. I mean, but I was happy they finally got rid of the secret identity. I mean, in between Peter Parker and Mary Jane, because that would have to make their relationship progress. Yeah, and then Mary Jane decides to stand up the groom and is like deuces and decides to go with Peter Parker. I like that scene because she's like,
go get him, Tiger.
And we all remember her calling Peter Parker Tiger in the comics and in the shows. Yeah, they end up together, but then right away he hears danger and he has to go web sling and stuff. She's just kind of there in the wind and she's kind of like, oh, what do I do now? It was a cool scene and it was kind of unsettling at the same time too. I didn't like it when I was younger, but I can appreciate it more now. And because it's like, yeah, you think it's actually going to work out being with a superhero? Like, he's always going to be like, his work is always going to take priority. It also gave me like Graduate vibes, where the same thing happens at the end. She leaves, she doesn't get married to the guy, and she's in the bus with Dustin Hoffman's character, and they're just kind of sitting there like, oh, what do we do now? I don't know. Yeah, so that was an interesting parallel. Now I just want to go back and kind of talk about Harry Osborn. when the fusion goes horribly wrong, instead of doing something about it, dude is really having a temper tantrum going, what are you doing? Yo, that was so stupid, man. Yo, dude is drinking at Mary Jane's engagement party and starts pimp smacking the fuck out of Peter. Like, dude, yo, you're the worst. You're the worst. I can't stand you, man. What do you expect Peter to do? At the same time, Peter, like, this would all be solved if you were just like, yo, man, I didn't kill your father. Spidey didn't kill your father. I don't know what happened, but I know Spider-Man didn't kill your father. That's not what it looks like. And then maybe he could roll up in a suit and try to explain it, something. But the whole time, Peter's just like, I'm just let him think whatever and not make him feel better in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, it seems like a big trope in movies and films, that the characters just don't communicate like regular humans. So it just propels the animosity for the majority of the movie or different seasons and things. And it's like, it can get old and ridiculous fast. And Harry really decided to give Doc Ock all the tritium just to kidnap Spider-Man. I know you really were seeking revenge and you had a vendetta against him, but was it really worth it, knowing he could blow up the city? Did you just not care if he blew up the city, or you didn't value your life or anybody else's life as long as you got Peter? I mean, I guess revenge can make people do crazy things, but it seemed very excessive. And he finally finds out that his best friend is Spider-Man, and he's shocked when it should make perfect sense for him. But that's fine, I'll give it to him. And he says, oh, Peter, you killed my father? And Peter could have just been like, no, I gotta go. But instead, he's like, there's bigger things between you and me, and so many. Once again, fueling the fire. All it would take is for you to say, no, I'll explain later. Wow. And Spider-Man saved Harry a few times. So in Harry's mind, wouldn't he be like, hey, something doesn't add up. Spidey saved me a few times at the same time. He killed my father. Something's not adding up. Is he a secret killer? Did he think he was a serial killer that was doing it in secret? Like, I'm not sure what the logic was. You also knew your father was up to some suspicious activity because of you saw the stuff that was going on with Green Goblin, and he figures out that his father's Green Goblin. So wouldn't that add up for you? Yeah, and then conveniently, Harry just starts to hallucinate. Like, he didn't hallucinate this whole time. I mean, he was acting a little crazy, but then he just hallucinates his father. And then he loses his temper once again and then throws the dagger through the mirror. And it just happens to be the goblin lair. That was convenient. I mean, I guess he was crazy in the comics too, but I think in some iterations, he was crazy from a product of taking the serum and stuff. And we know that's the same thing that happened to Norman, so that'll make sense. But yeah, I didn't really feel like that worked. Yeah, and in case you didn't know he was evil and he was going to be the new Green Goblin, you see him at Mary Jane's wedding with a green bow. Now let's talk about Pete and MJ's toxic ass relationship. Back in the day, I guess I was younger and I was a romantic. All I wanted was for them to end up together and stuff. But there was a lot of like horrible behavior on both parts in this film. Yeah, Pete's birthday, she's flirting mad hard, touching Peter's face, and yeah, and then she's like, okay, well, whatever. I'm seeing someone. Like, wow, take it easy. You know, at the same time, yeah, Pete keeps saying I can't be with you, but doesn't explain why. Like, that. What's with Pete not ever being able to explain himself? And yeah, and so his crutch is that, like, oh, I want to protect you. You know, in his mind, oh, if people knew who I was, they would come after you. But homegirl got kidnapped in every film. And Aunt May got terrorized and kidnapped. And they didn't know who Spider-Man's true identity was. So that's a load of BS. That doesn't make sense. Wow. Shaking my head. Yeah, that Peter misses her play and tries to apologize on the phone, but she's upset. And then the phone goes off the hook because he didn't have any quarters. That's kind of sad. And he's like, here's the deal. I'm Spider-Man. Summon. And so you're telling it to a phone that's dead? Do you feel better about yourself? I get it's supposed to be a cathartic moment, but that was corny, man. So then Peter's working at the engagement party taking photos, and then you decide to read her poetry. So you want to read her poetry to swoon her, but you don't want to be with her. Yeah, I'm confused. Mary Jane seems to be confused, and Peter seems to be confused. Mary Jane was like, I just wanted my friend. At no point did you guys feel like you guys had just a best friend relationship. Never felt that way. Yeah, then Peter decides to take a break from being Spider-Man, and it's like, okay, cool, I can meet up with MJ and I can be with her. And then he changed his mind and was like, psych. Turns out I'm going to be Spider-Man again. So she's like, what do you want to tell me? Oh, turns out I thought I could be with you, but I can't be with you. Once again, it felt selfish. It just felt selfish. Yo, Mary Jane is a freak, man. She got that fetish from that upside down Spider-Man kiss. So she was trying to recreate that with John Jameson, who's supposed to be J. Jonah Jameson's son. And yeah, that was kind of weird and freaky, man. And then she's like, whatever. Like, you could tell she did not care. And he was like, oh man, I feel like I'm on the moon again. Yeah, it doesn't seem like Peter and Mary Jane are a good couple in this universe, at least. And their relationship gets even more toxic in the third one. So yeah, they probably should have just called it quits. So let's move on to the Easter eggs. The Asian lady on the train was singing the classic Spider-Man from the cartoon. So that was a good homage to the OG. Doc Connors makes his cameo. He was always an interesting villain. He was a lizard. He tried to grow his arm back with lizard DNA and turns into a giant lizard terrorizing Peter. We see him in Amazing Spider-Man. But I would have liked to have seen this one with Peter, since he had a rapport with him in the previous ones. They make a Doctor Strange reference in this film.
Doctor Strange.
That's pretty good. But it's taken. Wait, I got it.
This was before the MCU, so I don't think they had any plans for Doctor Strange to roll up in this. But Sam Raimi will be directing the new Doctor Strange movie for the MCU, and Tobey Maguire might roll up. We also had the essential Stan Lee cameo, saving the day as per usual. R.I.P. Stan the Man. Yeah, Bruce Campbell comes back. He's a asshole usher who doesn't let Peter in to Mary Jane's play. I think he had a longer scene in the 2.1, but they removed that. By the way, Peter rolls up mad late to the play, and because he had to save the day and his scooter got wrecked, so he subdued some criminals and just came back with this dilapidated car all jacked up, bullet holes and everything. And the cops were like, hey, you got to move it. If not, we'll tow it. We'll tow it. Yo, don't you have any questions to ask him? What? That was kind of crazy. And when Peter throws the suit out, it's clearly a frame from the classic comic book cover. So just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, Spider-Man 2, for me, it falls prey to the post-Nolan times. But I can still appreciate it for what it is and still acknowledge the OGs who did it first, because without Spider-Man, we would not have the MCU. I was always more interested in the Peter Parker parts, so I think going forward with the other movies and the reboots, they made it so Spider-Man became more of an interesting character, but Peter Parker actually kind of fell prey to that. Yeah. Once again, I still don't understand the motivations of Doc Ock and his mechanical arms. They just seemed mad suicidal and didn't feel like having one solid plan. So not to take away from Alfred Molina's performance, because I think he did the best that he could have done, and he will be reprising his role as Doc Ock, so it'll be interesting to see him redeem the character. And how is he coming back? Well, I'll explain that another time. It's your boy, the Infinity Blerd, your friendly neighborhood nerd and movie buff. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe.